Admiral Deho stood on the bridge of Unji's dream, looking at the planet below. Velkara was beautiful from orbit. Blue oceans, green landmasses, cities that sparkled in the sunlight. It looked peaceful, almost like Earth. For the first time since New Haven, Deho hesitated. "Sir?" Jiho asked quietly. "Orders?" Deho was silent. Somewhere in the back of his mind he heard his sister's voice from years ago, teaching children about xenobiology. He remembered Yunji's excited questions about alien species. Her desire to understand and learn. Would she want this? Would any of those children want this? "Admiral," Jiho said again. "The fleet is waiting." Before Deho could respond, a communication came through from the reconnaissance team still in orbit around New Haven. They'd been documenting the Velkan occupation. The footage showed what the Velkans had done with the colony. They'd turned it into a museum, a celebration of their peaceful annexation of human territory. They'd rebuilt the school as a monument. To Velkan benevolence, there was a plaque. It talked about how the Velkans had graciously accepted human surrender, how they'd brought order to a chaotic colony, how the unfortunate incident had been regrettable but necessary to establish proper authority. The bodies of the children weren't mentioned. The massacre wasn't mentioned. It was as if 43 lives had been erased from history entirely. Deho watched this footage. He felt his hesitation die. "Begin landing operations," he ordered. Jiho looked surprised. "Sir? We could bombard from orbit. Destroy their defenses from space." "No, we land. We take it from them face to face." Deho's voice was hard. "They need to see us. Need to understand this isn't some abstract military defeat. This is personal." The Velkan military command was confused by this decision. Admiral Kresh had prepared for orbital bombardment. He had no strategy for defending against a ground invasion. Who did that anymore? It was inefficient, costly, dangerous for the attackers. Why would they land troops? One commander asked. They could destroy us from orbit without risk. Kresh understood. Because they want us to suffer. They want to look us in the eyes while they do it. Hundreds of transport ships descended through Velkara's atmosphere. The Velkans fired every anti-aircraft weapon they had. They shot down dozens of transports. Thousands of humans died before even reaching the ground. The transports kept coming. On the ground, Velkan soldiers prepared for battle. They set up defensive positions around every major city. They had superior knowledge of the terrain, prepared fortifications, supply lines. By every military calculation, they should be able to hold. But calculations didn't account for soldiers who'd already accepted death. The first human units landed outside Thraxia, the capital city. The Velkans opened fire immediately. The humans didn't take cover. They just kept advancing. When their vehicles were destroyed, they got out and walked. When they ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When they couldn't walk anymore, they crawled. "What are they?" a young Velkan soldier screamed. "Why won't they stop?" His commander had no answer. The battle for Thraxia lasted 3 weeks. It was street by street, building by building. The Velkans tried to surrender multiple times. First the entire city, then neighborhood by neighborhood, then individual buildings. The humans ignored every surrender attempt. "We want unconditional surrender of the entire empire," was the only response. From inside the High Council chambers. "Those are the terms." The Velkans realized they would have to fight for every inch of their capital. They began to understand what they'd awakened. Minho fought in the urban combat. His shoulder still hadn't healed properly from the fortress battle. He didn't care. He moved through the city with his squad, clearing buildings methodically. In one building, they found Velkan civilians, families hiding in basements, children crying. The squad stopped, uncertain. These weren't soldiers. They were just people trying to survive. Minho looked at them, looked at the Velkan children. For a moment, he saw Yunji in their faces. "Move to the next building," he told his squad. "These are civilians. But sir, they're not soldiers. We don't kill them." His voice was firm. "We're not them." The squad moved on. Behind them, the Velkan families remained alive, shocked that the humans had spared them. Not all human soldiers made the same choice. Some, broken by grief and rage, killed anything they found. But many, like Minho, remembered why they were supposed to be different. Remembered that losing your humanity entirely meant the Velkans had taken even more from them. The High Council of Velkara barricaded itself in a massive bunker beneath the capital. It had been built to survive orbital bombardment, nuclear strikes, anything. They believed they were safe there. High Commander Thrall watched the battle through cameras and sensors. He saw his people dying, saw his cities burning, and finally truly understood what he'd done. "We made a mistake," he said to his council. "We thought restraint was weakness. We thought mercy was cowardice. We were wrong." "Then surrender," one council member said. "Save what's left." "They won't accept surrender. Not from individuals. They want us, all of us, in person." Thrall looked at the bunker's defenses. "And they're coming." The human engineers studied the bunker. It was impressive. Layers of armor, energy shields, defensive weapons. Taking it by force would cost thousands of lives. They didn't care. They spent 3 days breaking through defenses that had been designed to be impregnable. They used explosives that risked collapsing the entire structure. They dug, they burned. They used tools and weapons in bare hands. When conventional explosives didn't work, they brought down building-sized drill machines. When those failed, they just kept hitting the same spot over and over until the armor cracked. The Velkans inside the bunker felt each impact. They were trapped, watching the humans get closer. Some wanted to flee, but there was nowhere to run. On the 3rd day, the humans breached the final door. They flooded into the council chambers in full combat armor, weapons ready, covered in dust and blood. High Commander Thrall stood in the center of the chamber, wearing his formal robes. The rest of his council stood with him. They had prepared a surrender ceremony according to ancient Velkan tradition. Beautiful and dignified, Thrall began to speak the ritual words. "We, the High Council of Velkara, do hereby..." Admiral Deho shot him. One shot to the head. Thrall dropped without finishing his sentence. The council chamber went silent. The other Velkans stared in shock. "There is no ceremony," Deho said. "There is no dignity in this. You wanted to surrender? Fine. Here are the terms." He transmitted the demands directly. Total demilitarization. Every weapon destroyed. Every warship decommissioned. The Velkan Empire would cease to exist as a military power. Reparations that would take generations to pay. Not because humanity needed the money, but because the Velkans needed to be reminded every single day what they'd done. Human oversight of the Velkan government. For the next century, humans would have veto power over every major decision the Velkans made. And the most painful term, every Velkan child would be required to learn the names of the 43 children who died at New Haven. It would be part of their mandatory education. They would learn how humanity had tried to make peace, how the Velkans had responded, what it cost. "These are not negotiable," Deho said. "Accept them or we keep burning until nothing is left." The remaining council members looked at each other. They had no choice. They accepted everything. Premier Kyung-ho arrived on Velkara to personally oversee the occupation. He walked through the streets of Thraxia, seeing the destruction. The burned buildings, the traumatized Velkans, the human soldiers exhausted and haunted. In a plaza, he found a memorial that the surviving Velkans had built. It listed the names of their own civilians who had died in the battle. Thousands of names. Kyung-ho looked at it for a long time. Then he ordered a second memorial built beside it. This one would list the names of the human soldiers who died taking the city. "Put them together," he said. "Let everyone see the cost." Both sides. Hana worked in the medical centers, treating wounded from both species. The Velkans were terrified of her at first, expecting cruelty, but she treated them the same as she treated humans, with professional care. One young Velkan soldier, barely more than a child, asked her why. "Because you're not the ones who burned the school," Hana said. "You're just the ones who paid the price for it." "My father died in the fighting," the young Velkan said quietly. "I'm sorry." And Hana meant it. Somewhere in all this, she'd remembered she was a doctor, that her job was to preserve life, not enable death. "I'm sorry for all of it." Minho stood in the ruins of the Velkan Council building. He'd survived the entire war somehow, wounded 3 times but alive. He thought about Yunji, about what she would think if she could see him now. A Velkan approached him carefully. An elderly female, scales faded with age. "You are human?" she asked in broken English. "Yes." "You fought in the war?" Minho nodded. "I lost my grandchildren in the battle for this city. They were soldiers, but they were children to me." She paused. "I heard what started this. The school. The human children. I want you to know, many of us would have stopped it if we'd known. Many of us are ashamed." Minho looked at her, saw genuine grief in her eyes, the same grief he felt. "I lost my daughter in that school," he said quietly. "She was 7. She wanted to be a scientist. The Velkan's eyes widened. I'm sorry we're becoming monsters to avenge you. But he wasn't sorry enough to stop. None of them were. The first battle happened at a Velkan border station called Outpost 17. It was a small military installation, designed to monitor traffic and provide early warning of threats. 200 Velkan personnel worked there. They'd been warned that human ships were coming, but no one was particularly worried. They'll want to negotiate, the station commander said. Or perhaps fire a few shots to make themselves feel better. Then we'll all sit down and work something out. The human fleet arrived in complete silence. No demands, no threats, no communication at all. The station commander tried to hail them. Human vessels, this is Velkan Outpost 17. We are a military installation. Under Galactic Convention, we request parley before any hostile action. Silence. Human vessels, respond please. We are willing to discuss terms. The human ships just kept coming. Admiral Deho sat on the bridge of Yunji's dream, watching the station grow larger on the display. Jiho stood beside him, coordinating the attack. Hana was in the medical bay preparing for casualties. They're hailing us, the communications officer said. Requesting parley. Ignore it, Deho said. Sir, Galactic Convention requires, I said ignore it. The first wave of human ships didn't use long-range weapons. They accelerated to ramming speed and crashed directly into the station's defensive platforms. The explosions were massive. Both the platforms and the ships were destroyed, but the humans had accomplished their goal. The station's shields were down. The Velkans were shocked. They're ramming us. They're destroying their own ships. The second wave came in firing. But again, they didn't maintain safe distances for space combat. They came in close, too close, where neither side could effectively use their weapons without risk. Then they just started boarding. Human soldiers in combat armor cut through the station's hull and flooded inside. The Velkans tried to mount a defense, but humans fought differently. They didn't take cover properly, didn't fall back when wounded, didn't stop advancing even when the tactical situation was hopeless. One Velkan soldier watched a human take 3 plasma shots to the chest, enough to kill anything, and the human kept coming. Kept firing, killed 2 more Velkans before finally dropping. What are they? The Velkan whispered. The station fell in 4 hours. The human soldiers went room by room, clearing everything. When Velkans tried to surrender, raising their hands in the universal gesture, the humans shot them anyway. One group of Velkans, seeing there was no mercy, locked themselves in the command center and sent out a final message. They're not taking prisoners. They're killing everyone. Send help. Send. The transmission cut off as human soldiers breached the room. When it was over, the station was silent. 200 Velkans dead, 70 humans dead, but the humans counted it as a victory because they'd accomplished their objective, establishing that surrender was not an option. News of the battle reached the Galactic Council before it reached the Velkan Empire. Ambassador Vryn called an emergency session. The humans have violated every convention of warfare, she said, her voice shaking. They're not accepting surrenders. They're killing wounded enemy soldiers. She couldn't finish. They're teaching the Velkans a lesson, another ambassador said quietly, that there are things worse than honorable defeat. Premier Kyungho was called before the council to explain. He attended via hologram, not bothering to travel in person. Premier, your forces are committing war crimes, Vryn said. You must order them to stop this barbaric behavior. No, Kyungho said simply. You cannot, the Galactic Convention clearly states. The Galactic Convention also clearly states that civilian targets are off-limits. The children are off-limits. Where was the council when the Velkans burned a school? His voice was ice. You watch them kill our children and call for dialogue. Now you watch us kill their soldiers and call it barbaric. I call it justice. This is not justice. This is revenge! Yes, it is. Kyungho didn't even try to deny it. And we're just getting started. The Velkan Empire mobilized its full military. 300 warships, thousands of soldiers, weapons that had conquered 17 star systems. Admiral Kresh led the fleet personally, determined to stop the humans before this got worse. We'll engage them in open space, Kresh told his commanders. A proper battle. We have superior numbers and technology. Once they see they cannot win, they'll surrender. But the humans didn't fight the way Velkans expected. They didn't form battle lines or engage at optimal ranges. They split into small groups, attacked from multiple directions, and seemed perfectly willing to trade one ship for one ship, even though they were outnumbered. The Battle of Velkara's moon lasted 6 days. It was the bloodiest engagement in galactic history. The humans were trying to take the fortress that protected the approach to Velkara itself. The Velkans were determined to stop them. Human casualties were terrible. 30% of the fleet was destroyed or disabled. On the medical ships, Hana worked without sleep. The wounded kept coming. Soldiers with burns covering their bodies. Soldiers missing limbs. Soldiers who should have been dead but who kept asking when they could return to duty. "You can't," Hana told one soldier who'd lost both legs below the knee. "You're going into surgery and then recovery." "They killed kids," the soldier said. "I can still fire a weapon. Send me back." She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him to stop, to rest, to preserve what was left of his life. But she looked at his face and saw the same thing she felt. The same thing they all felt. So she stabilized him and sent him back. On the fortress, Velkan defenders fought desperately. They had the advantage of position, of prepared defenses, of supply lines. But the humans just kept coming. Wave after wave, attack after attack. They never stopped. Never paused. Never gave the Velkans time to rest or regroup. "They're not fighting like a military," one Velkan commander reported. "They're fighting like a natural disaster, like a flood that just keeps rising." Minho was in the assault teams. He'd been trained quickly, too quickly by normal standards, but he didn't need to be a tactical genius. He just needed to move forward and shoot. That he could do. His squad was pinned down in a corridor by Velkan defensive fire. The squad leader was calculating their options when Minho just stood up and started walking toward the enemy position. Plasma fire tore through the air around him. One shot burned across his shoulder. He didn't stop. He just kept walking and shooting. The Velkans were so shocked by this insanity that their fire became disorganized. Minho's squad used the distraction to advance. They took the position. Minho collapsed from blood loss immediately after, but he'd accomplished what he'd set out to do. "Why did you do that?" a medic asked while treating his wound. Minho just stared at nothing. "My daughter wanted to study alien life. To understand the universe." His voice was empty. "They killed her for no reason. So now I kill them for no reason. It's fair." The fortress fell on the 6th day. The Velkans tried to surrender when they realized the battle was lost. They sent a formal request for terms, following all proper military protocol. The human response was to breach the command center and kill everyone inside. Admiral Kresh watched the fortress fall from his flagship. He felt something he'd never experienced before. Not fear exactly, something deeper. A fundamental understanding that the universe had rules he didn't know. He sent a message to High Commander Thrall. "Request permission to withdraw and offer full reparations. The humans are not fighting a conventional war. We cannot defeat an enemy that doesn't value its own survival." Thrall's response was immediate. "Permission denied. The Empire does not retreat from primitives. Defend Velkara. That is an order." So Kresh prepared to defend his homeworld against an enemy he didn't understand. He reinforced every defensive position. He called in every available ship. He prepared strategies and contingencies and backup plans, but he knew deep in his bones that it wouldn't matter. You couldn't defeat an enemy that had already decided it was dead. On the human flagship, Admiral Daiho received reports of victory. The path to Velkara was open. The cost had been terrible, 18,000 humans dead, but the objective was achieved. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt nothing. He'd become a machine that processed targets and casualties and acceptable losses. Somewhere inside, the man who'd wanted peace was screaming. But that man was buried so deep that Daiho couldn't hear him anymore. "Sir," Jiho reported, "the Velkans are sending a message. High Commander Thrall is offering full surrender, total withdrawal from human space, unlimited reparations, exile for those responsible for New Haven." Daiho listened to the message. Thrall's voice was formal, following all proper diplomatic channels. He was offering everything a victor could want. Daiho's response was broadcast not just to the Velkan fleet, but to every ship in both armadas. He wanted everyone to hear this. "High Commander Thrall, you killed 43 children and called it an accident. You demanded surrender while their bodies were still burning. You thought we would accept your apology and your reparations and we would all move on." He paused. "You were wrong. We don't want your territory. We don't want your money. We want your species to understand what you did. And the only way to teach that lesson is to make you feel what we felt. You killed our children. Now we kill. The message from New Haven reached Earth 7 days after the school burned. 7 days of not knowing. 7 days of hoping it wasn't as bad as the first report suggested. Then the full footage arrived. Every human alive watched it. The footage had been captured by surveillance drones, by personal devices, by the colony's security system. It showed everything. The ships arriving, the 15-minute ultimatum, the explosion, the school collapsing, parents running, children's bodies in the rubble, and then it showed the Velkans calling it an accident and demanding surrender anyway. Premier Kyung-ho watched the footage in his office with the doors locked. He watched it 3 times. Then he threw up in his private bathroom and washed his face with cold water. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Something had changed, not just in him, in everyone. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Ambassador Vryn, a respected mediator from the Selenari species, took the floor. She was known for her wisdom, her fairness, her ability to find peace in impossible situations. This tragedy must not lead to further violence, she said. We call on both the Velkan Empire and humanity to enter immediate negotiations. Reparations can be paid. Territory can be ceded. Justice can be served through diplomatic means. The human delegation sat silent through her entire speech. When she finished, they stood up and walked out without saying a word. Vryn was shocked. Where are they going? An aide checked his communication device. Back to Earth, Ambassador. All of them. But we haven't finished. I don't think they care. On Earth, something was happening that hadn't occurred in centuries. Every nation was mobilizing. Not slowly with debates and negotiations and political maneuvering. Instantly, unanimously, as if some ancient switch had been flipped in the collective human mind. Every shipyard stopped building cargo vessels and started building warships. Every factory stopped making consumer goods and started making weapons. Every resource, every piece of technology, every ounce of industrial capacity was redirected to a single purpose. The aliens who maintained embassies on Earth sent frightened reports to their homeworlds. The humans had changed. Their faces were different. Their voices were different. They moved with a focus that was terrifying to watch. They're not angry, one ambassador reported. Anger would be better. They're organized, like they've done this before, like something in their DNA just remembered what it was built for. Captain Deho was called to a meeting at military headquarters. He walked in expecting a briefing. He walked out as Admiral Deho, commander of something called the Retribution Fleet. We're giving you everything, Premier Kyung-ho told him. Every ship we can build, every weapon we can make, every soldier who volunteers, he paused. And they're all volunteering, Deho, all of them. How many ships are we talking about? 200 warships ready now. Another 300 in 3 months. We're building them faster than we ever built anything. Kyung-ho's voice was hollow. We're good at this, building things to kill with. We'd almost forgotten. Hana volunteered immediately as chief medical officer for the fleet, not to save lives, but to keep soldiers fighting longer. She told Deho this directly, wanted him to understand what she'd become. I'm not going there to heal, she said. I'm going there to enable. Hana, don't try to talk me out of it. They killed children, Deho. Children who wanted to learn and grow and become something beautiful. Her voice cracked. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to preserve life, but right now all I want is to help end theirs. Jiho joined as tactical commander. Together, the 3 of them from the Harmony's promise would lead humanity's revenge. Millions enlisted. Minho, the farmer who had lost his daughter, signed up the day after the footage reached Earth. His wife begged him not to go. He barely heard her. The man she'd married had died in the ruins of that school. What wore his face now was something else. Old veterans reported for duty. Men and women who'd sworn they'd never fight again, who'd tried to forget the things they'd done in Earth's last wars. But they remembered how, and now they had a reason to use it. Artists enlisted. Teachers enlisted. Engineers who'd built homes enlisted to build weapons instead. The entire species was transforming itself into an instrument of war. Ambassador Vryn tried one more time. She traveled to Earth personally, requested a meeting with Premier Kyung-ho. She brought proposals, peace plans, frameworks for justice that didn't involve more death. Kyung-ho received her politely. He listened to everything she had to say. Then he took her to the construction site of the memorial they were building. "This will list every name," he said. "Every child who died. We'll finish it before the fleet leaves. Premier, please. More violence won't bring them back. I know, but it will make sure no one ever does this again." He pointed to the base of the memorial, where words were being carved in every human language. "You see what it says? Forgiveness without justice is surrender. The Velkans think we're weak because we value peace. We're going to teach them the difference between choosing peace and being capable of violence. The Galactic Council will intervene. We cannot allow—" "Then you'll burn too." Kyung-ho said it calmly, like discussing the weather. "Ambassador, I respect you. I respect the Council. But if you put your fleets between us and the Velkans, we'll go through you. Please don't make us do that." Vryn left Earth shaken. She reported back to the Council that the humans weren't bluffing. They've stopped being a civilization. They're a weapon now, pointed at the Velkan Empire. "Then we'll stop them," one council member said. "With what? They're building faster than we can count. Training harder than makes sense. They're not sleeping, some of them. Just working, building, preparing." Vryn looked around the council chambers. "I've mediated hundreds of conflicts. I've seen species at war. But I've never seen anything like this. They're not fighting for territory or resources or ideology. They're fighting because someone hurt their children. And they won't stop until the debt is paid." At the training centers, human soldiers learned to fight differently than other species. There were no lessons in honor or proper surrender protocols. Instead, they practiced fighting while wounded, while exhausted, while everything screamed at them to quit. They ran drills with no surrender option. Their simulations always ended the same way: complete destruction of the enemy or complete destruction of themselves. There was no middle ground. Galactic observers watched the training and were disturbed. One of them reported, "They're teaching their soldiers to die well, not how to survive, how to die while still completing the mission." Admiral Kresh on Velkara received intelligence reports about Earth's mobilization. He read them with growing concern. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Where were the peace offers? The negotiations? The attempts at compromise? "They're building an attack fleet," he told High Commander Thrall. 200 ships, maybe more. So? Thrall was unconcerned. "We have 300. Better ships, better weapons. We've been fighting wars for 3,000 years. How long have humans had space travel? A century? Yes, but no buts, Admiral. Prepare our fleet for an engagement. We'll meet them in open space, have a proper battle, accept their surrender when they realize they're outmatched." Thrall smiled. Perhaps this will teach them respect. Kresh wasn't so sure. He'd seen the footage from New Haven after the occupation, the way the humans had looked at them. He'd thought it was defeat. Now he wondered. On Earth, the day came for the fleet to depart. 200 warships, each named for one of the children who'd died. The flagship was called Yunji's Dream. Admiral Daeho addressed the fleet before they launched. His speech was broadcast across all of human space, recorded for history. "We're not going to reclaim territory," he said. "We're not going to negotiate better terms. We're not soldiers fighting for their country. We're fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters who watched children burn and heard the people responsible call it an accident." He paused, letting that sink in. "The Velkans think we're weak because we tried to be peaceful. They think technology wins wars. They think honor and rules and civilized behavior matter." His voice hardened. "We're going to teach them what humans really are. We're the species that survived ice ages and plagues and each other. We're the species that looked at the atom and split it just to see what would happen. We're the species that went to war with ourselves for centuries and learned every possible way to kill. They wanted us to be reasonable. They wanted us to be civilized." Daeho's eyes were cold. "We'll show them what we really are. We're humans, and they just killed our children." The fleet launched. 200 ships carrying 60,000 soldiers, none of whom expected to come home. They'd all written final letters. They'd all said their goodbyes. They were already dead in their own minds, which made them more dangerous than any military force the galaxy had ever seen, because dead men can't be threatened, can't be intimidated, can't be reasoned with, they can only be stopped. And the Velkans were about to learn they didn't have enough bullets for that. As the fleet jumped to faster than light, Premier Kyung-ho stood before the unfinished memorial. Workers were still carving names, still polishing stone, still building something that would last forever. "I'm sorry," He whispered to the names. I'm sorry we couldn't protect you. Minho woke to the sound of birds that weren't really birds. The creatures on Kepler 442c looked more like flying lizards, but they sang in the morning just the same. He lay in bed for a moment listening to them, feeling grateful for the life he had built here. Dad. His daughter Yoonji burst into the room, already dressed for school. You promised to help with my project today. After breakfast, he said, smiling. What are you working on again? Xenobiology. I'm cataloging all the different species in Miller's Creek. Her eyes shone with excitement. At 7 years old, she already knew she wanted to be a scientist. She wanted to understand every living thing in the universe. New Haven was everything Minho had hoped for when he left Earth. The colony had been established 5 years ago on a world that was almost perfect. Breathable air, fresh water, soil that Earth crops loved. 47,000 people had made it their home. No wars, no pollution, no corporate overlords. Just families trying to build something good. The colony was spread across a valley between two mountain ranges. Farms in the lowlands, the main town in the center. Research stations in the hills. Everything was connected by clean roads and the cheerful chaos of people who actually knew their neighbors. Minho walked Yoonji to school, carrying her sample collection kit. They passed Hyunwoo, the colony's security chief, doing his morning rounds. The older man nodded to them. Morning, Minho. Yoonji. Morning, Chief. Yoonji waved enthusiastically. Hyunwoo smiled, but Minho noticed the man looked tired. He'd been a soldier once, back on Earth. He'd fought in the corporate wars before they ended. He'd come to New Haven hoping to never wear a uniform again. The school was a beautiful building built from local stone and earth timber. Inside, Salman was already preparing her classroom. She was one of the colony's favorite teachers, known for making history come alive for her students. Good morning, Yoonji, Salman said warmly. Ready for your presentation? Yoonji nodded excitedly and ran to join her classmates. Minho watched her go, feeling that familiar parent mixture of pride and worry. She was growing up so fast, she's brilliant, Salman said, seeing his expression. She asks questions I have to research to answer. She gets that from her mother. Minho paused. Thank you, Salman, for making her love learning. It's easy with students like her. Minho left for his farm, not knowing it would be the last normal conversation he would ever have. That afternoon, the long-range sensors detected ships. Big ones moving fast, heading directly for New Haven. Governor Jiwon called an emergency meeting. Hyunwoo was there, along with the colony's senior staff. They watched the sensor data with growing concern. Vulcan warships, the sensor operator said. 6 of them. Heavy cruisers. What are they doing in our space? Someone asked. I don't know, Jiwon said. But I'm going to find out. She opened a communication channel. For several minutes there was no response. Then a Vulcan face appeared on the screen. Admiral Kresh, his scales a dark gray, his eyes cold. Human colony designated New Haven, he said. You are hereby ordered to surrender to the Vulcan Empire. You have 15 minutes to comply. The room went silent. Then Jiwon found her voice. Admiral, we are a peaceful colony. We're not a military target. Whatever dispute exists between our governments. 14 minutes, Kresh interrupted. At least give us time to evacuate. We have children here, families. The Vulcan Empire is claiming this world. Resistance is futile. Comply or face consequences. The screen went dark. Hyunwoo stood up. We need to start evacuating now. Get everyone to the transport ships. 15 minutes isn't enough time, someone protested. I know, but we try anyway. Hyunwoo looked at Jiwon. I'll organize the defense. Buy as much time as I can. With what? We have security forces, not an army. I know what we have. Hyunwoo's voice was hard. But I'm not letting them take this place without a fight. The alarms started blaring across the colony. Parents grabbed children. Teachers evacuated classrooms. The transport ships, designed for cargo and occasional passenger service, suddenly had to carry thousands of people. At the school, So-min moved quickly. Everyone line up. We're going on a field trip. She kept her voice calm, not wanting to panic the children. But Yoonji, smart as always, knew something was wrong. Miss So-min, what's happening? Just a drill, sweetie. Everything's fine, but it wasn't fine. In space above them, the Vulcan ships moved into position. Admiral Kresh reviewed the battle plan. It was simple, elegant. Fire one shot at their communications array. Show them you're serious. Accept their surrender. Minimal casualties. The humans would see the logic of joining a superior civilization. It was supposed to be a precision strike, a demonstration of power. The Velkin weapons officer targeted the communications tower. He fired. But there was an error in the calculations. Or maybe the wind shifted. Or maybe the universe itself was trying to send a warning that no one heard. The shot missed the tower. It hit the school instead. The building exploded. Stone and timber and everything inside turned to fire and dust in an instant. 43 children died before they could even scream. Soman died trying to shield them with her own body. Yoonji never made it out. Her sample collection kit, the one her father had carried that morning, was found later in the wreckage. Melted plastic and charred notes about the species she'd wanted to study. Across the colony, parents heard the explosion. They turned and saw the smoke rising. They started running toward the school, screaming names. Minho was one of them. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. His lungs burned. His vision blurred with tears. He prayed to gods he didn't believe in. Please, not Yoonji. Please. But when he reached the school, there was nothing left but rubble and flames. Rescue workers were already searching, but their faces told him everything he needed to know. Someone tried to hand him a small backpack they'd found. Yoonji's. He took it and fell to his knees. On the Velkin flagship, Admiral Kresh received the damage report. He stared at it, confused. A school? We hit a school? Yes, Admiral. Appears to have been a targeting error. Kresh felt a moment of genuine regret. This was not honorable. This was not how Velkins waged war. Open a channel. Express our regret for the accident. Then repeat the surrender demand. The message was sent. The Velkin Empire regrets the accidental loss of life. This tragedy could have been avoided if you had surrendered as requested. To prevent further casualties, you are again ordered to surrender immediately. In the colony command center, Hyunwoo heard the message. He looked at Governor Jiwon. Her face was pale, shocked. They killed 43 children and they're calling it an accident, Hyunwoo said quietly. And now they want us to surrender. We can't fight them, Jiwon whispered. We have maybe 200 security personnel. They have warships, I know. Hyunwoo stood up. He walked to the communications console. Get me a secure line to Earth, full encryption. What are you going to tell them? Hyunwoo thought of the children, of Yoonji and her dreams of being a scientist, of all the futures that had just been erased in one terrible moment. The truth, that New Haven has fallen, that we tried, and that when Earth asks what they should do, he paused. Tell them to make these bastards pay. The message was sent. Then Hyunwoo turned to his security forces. We're going to evacuate as many people as we can. We'll hold them off as long as possible. Chief, we can't win this, one of them said, I know. But we can buy time, and we can make them remember that humans don't just roll over. The evacuation was chaos. 4,000 people made it to the transport ships. 43,000 didn't. Some refused to leave. Others couldn't reach the ships in time. Many, like Minho, simply stood staring at the ruins of the school, unable to move or think or do anything but grieve. Hyunwoo's security forces put up what resistance they could. They had small arms, a few anti-aircraft weapons. Against Velkin warships, it was meaningless. But they fought anyway. The Velkins were confused by this. Why die for a lost cause? In their culture, surrender meant honor preserved. You lost the battle but lived to fight another day. This desperate resistance made no sense. After 6 hours, it was over. The Velkins landed and took control of the colony. They were surprised to find humans still there, thousands of them standing among the ruins, refusing to run. Admiral Kresh walked through the conquered colony, disturbed by what he saw. Humans who stared at him with expressions he couldn't read. Humans who stood holding the possessions of dead children. Humans who looked broken but somehow still dangerous. He tried to explain to them that this was just how war worked, that the school had been an accident, that they should accept their new place in the Empire with dignity. The humans said nothing. They just stared. And in their eyes, Kresh saw something that made his scales prickle with instinctive unease. He didn't know what it was. Couldn't name it. His species had no word for that particular look because they'd never felt it themselves. But he should have recognized it. Should have understood what he was seeing. It was the look of people who had just lost everything, who had nothing left to lose. Who would remember every detail of this moment for the rest of their lives? It was the look that came just before humans stopped being civilized and remembered what they really were. It was rage, pure, patient, and absolutely unforgiving. The stars stretched endlessly before the Harmony's promise as it crossed into Velkan space. Captain Deho stood on the bridge, watching the navigation display with careful eyes. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. They had traveled 3 months to reach this moment, the first official meeting between humanity and the Velkan Empire. "Captain," receiving their greeting signal, said Jiho from the tactical station. His voice was steady, professional. "They're sending coordinates for the landing approach." Deho nodded. "Take us in." Nice and slow. "Let's not spook our new friends." In the medical bay below, Hana checked her supplies one more time. She was Deho's younger sister, though few people aboard knew that. She preferred to be judged on her skills as a doctor, not her family connections. Still, she felt nervous. This was humanity's biggest diplomatic mission yet, and any mistake could ruin everything. The Velkans had ruled their part of space for thousands of years. They were reptilian, tall and scaled with eyes that saw into the infrared spectrum. Their empire covered 17 star systems, and their military was known throughout the Galactic Council. When they had finally agreed to meet with humanity, Earth's governments had celebrated for days. The ship descended through Velkara's atmosphere. The planet was beautiful. Purple skies, silver oceans, and cities that seemed to grow from the ground itself like metal trees. Everything about it spoke of age and power and civilizations that had thrived while humans still lived in caves. "Impressive," Jiho muttered, watching the cityscape spread below them. "Remember why we're here," Deho said quietly. "Trade routes, cultural exchange, peaceful cooperation. We smile, we bring gifts, and we make friends." The landing pad was enormous, surrounded by Velkan guards and ceremonial armor. As the Harmony's promise settled down, Deho could see hundreds of Velkans watching from viewing platforms. This was clearly an event for them too. High Commander Thrall waited at the base of the landing ramp. He was massive even for a Velkan, with scales that had darkened with age to a deep bronze. His ceremonial robes were covered in medals and symbols that Deho didn't recognize. "Welcome to Velkara," Thrall said in perfect English. The Velkans had learned human languages quickly. Too quickly, some Earth diplomats had worried. "Your journey has been long. Please accept our hospitality." The next 3 days were a blur of meetings, ceremonies, and cultural exchanges. The Velkans seemed genuinely interested in humanity. They asked endless questions about Earth's history, about art and music and the 1,000 different cultures that had somehow united to reach the stars. But Deho noticed something in their questions. A certain tone, the way they smiled when humans talked about their wars, their struggles, their emotions. It reminded him of the way adults might humor a child telling an exciting story. "They think we're weak," Jiho said one night, in the privacy of their quarters. "Maybe," Deho replied, "or maybe they just see things differently. They've been doing this for thousands of years. We're the new kids trying to play with the big children." "I don't like how they look at Hana." Deho had noticed that too. The Velkan males seemed fascinated by the human females, especially his sister. It made his protective instincts flare, but he pushed them down. Cultural differences, he told himself. Don't assume the worst. The final night they held a grand banquet in the humans' honor. The hall was magnificent, carved from a single piece of dark stone that seemed to absorb light. Hundreds of Velkans attended, dressed in their finest. The humans, just 30 of them, sat at the high table with Thrall and his officers. The Velkan food was surprisingly good. The drinks, however, were powerful. Deho noticed several younger Velkans becoming loud and aggressive as the night wore on. Thrall seemed unconcerned, as if this was normal behavior. One young Velkan noble, his scales bright with youth, approached the human table. He was clearly drunk on the fermented nectar they'd been serving. He stopped behind Hana's chair and leaned down close to her. "You smell different than our females," he said, his breath hot against her neck. Softer, weaker, Hana froze. Around the table, several humans started to rise, but Deho raised one hand, keeping them seated. He stood slowly and stepped between his sister and the Velkan. "I think you've had too much to drink," Deho said calmly. "Perhaps you should rejoin your table." The young Velkan laughed. "Is this one your mate? Or just another soft thing you humans keep safe?" He reached past Deho toward Hana. Deho caught his wrist. "Don't." The hall went quiet. Every Velkan turned to watch. Thrall leaned forward in his seat, interested. The young noble's eyes narrowed. Then, Almost casually, he struck Deho across the face with his other hand. The blow was hard enough to split Deho's lip and knock him back a step. Jiho's hand went to his sidearm. Several other humans started to stand, the air filled with tension, violence just a heartbeat away. Deho wiped blood from his mouth. He looked at the young Velkin for a long moment. Then he looked at Jiho and shook his head slightly. "We're leaving," Deho announced to his crew. "Thank High Commander Thrall for his hospitality. Tell him we'll be returning to our ship." "Captain," Jiho started. "Now, Lieutenant." The humans filed out of the hall in silence. Behind them, Deho could hear Velkin laughter. Not cruel exactly, but dismissive. The sound of people who had just watched something amusing but ultimately meaningless. On the ship, in the privacy of the conference room, Jiho exploded. "We should have what?" Deho interrupted. "Started a diplomatic incident? Maybe a war? Over one drunk idiot?" "He hit you, I know." "I was there." Deho touched his split lip. "But we came here to make peace, not to prove how tough we are." Hana spoke quietly. "He's right, Jiho. What would fighting have accomplished? It would have shown them we're not weak." "They already think we're weak," Deho said. "One fight won't change that. We need to be smart about this." They left Velkara the next morning. Thrall sent a formal apology, calling the incident regrettable but also a result of youthful enthusiasm and cultural misunderstanding. The young noble was not punished. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council contacted both Earth and the Velkin Empire. They had heard about the incident and wanted to mediate. Their message to the Velkins was clear. Humans were unpredictable when provoked. Their history was full of violence that seemed to make no strategic sense. "Be careful." Thrall read the message and laughed. He called his senior commanders together and showed them the footage from the banquet. The human captain, standing there after being struck, doing nothing but leave peacefully. "This is what the council warns us about," Thrall said. "A species that runs away from insults? That bleeds and does nothing?" He dismissed the warning. "The humans are soft. Clever perhaps, creative certainly, but soft. When the time comes to expand our borders, they will surrender like all the others. They understand the logic of superior force." His commanders agreed. They had seen the same footage. They reached the same conclusion. None of them understood what they had actually witnessed. They saw restraint and thought it was weakness. They saw a man choosing peace and thought it was cowardice. They didn't understand that Deho had been calculating, that every human on that ship had been calculating. How many Velkins they could kill before being overwhelmed, what it would cost, whether it was worth it. They had chosen peace. For now, but the Velkins had just made a terrible mistake. They had shown humanity that they could be struck and humiliated without consequence. They had revealed their arrogance, their assumption of superiority, and most dangerous of all, they had made Deho's crew angry while teaching them exactly where Velkara was and how its defenses worked. 6 months later, when everything went wrong, when the burning started, some Velkin historians would look back at this moment. They would watch the footage again, more carefully this time. They would see what they had missed. The look in Deho's eyes as he wiped blood from his mouth. Not fear, not submission, memory, and calculation, but by then it would be far too late.